The black horse had been tied up for days, the ropes cutting into its skin. The millionaire in the Bentley parked nearby huffed in annoyance, another delay in his day. But when his eyes met the desperate gaze of the animal, something trembled deep within his frozen heart. Before we begin this story of transformation, tell me where you're watching from. Go ahead and get comfortable. And please don't forget to support us by hitting that like button if you believe compassion can change lives. All right, ready? Let's begin. The rain drummed against the windshield of the black Bentley as the engine began to make a strange noise. Marcus Aldrich pressed his lips into a thin line. One more inconvenience in a day already full of irritations. He had just closed the deal on the Davis family's small business, completely ignoring the tears of the widow who begged for more time to pay off her debts. Business is business, he repeated to himself, as he always did. The car finally died on a rural dirt road, surrounded by abandoned pastures. He grabbed his phone, dialing his private driver. "Where the hell are you? My car broke down on this godforsaken road. Mr. Aldrich, I'm an hour away. The tow truck will take at least 2 hours to get there." He hung up angrily, cursing under his breath. 2 years building his empire, closing deal after deal, and now he was stuck in the middle of nowhere because of a ridiculous mechanical problem. He got out of the car, adjusting his $3,000 Italian suit, completely out of place in the muddy landscape. That's when he heard it. A low sound, almost a moan. He turned his head, irritated, searching for the source of the noise that was interrupting his thoughts about how to fire the mechanic responsible for the car's last tune-up. There, about 50 yards away, near a solitary tree, was a dark, shifting shadow. He took a few steps closer, still reluctant to soil his leather shoes. It was a horse. Not just any horse, a magnificent animal, its coat as black as night. But it had clearly seen better days. It was tied to the tree with thick, dirty ropes that were cutting into its skin in several places. Patches of dried blood marked its neck and legs. The animal's eyes, large and expressive, locked onto his with a disturbing intensity. "What the hell?" he muttered, keeping his distance. Animals had always bothered him. Too unpredictable, too emotional. His philosophy was simple. If it didn't generate profit, it wasn't worth his attention. The horse let out another low moan, trying to move but held back by the ropes that kept it prisoner. One of the ropes had created a deep wound on its neck, and flies buzzed around the open sores. Marcus checked his watch. 1 hour and 40 minutes until the tow truck arrived. He looked around. No houses in sight, no one who could solve this problem for him. He went back to the car, turned on the air conditioning, and tried to make a few work calls, but the signal was weak. Through the windshield he could still see the horse. The animal never stopped looking in his direction, as if it knew he was the only person for miles. There was something in that gaze that deeply unsettled him. It wasn't just physical pain, but a kind of resignation he recognized, though he couldn't place from where. "Not my problem," he said aloud, trying to convince himself. "Someone will show up. Someone always does." But no one showed up, and the horse remained there, tied up, bleeding, watching. 15 minutes passed, half an hour. The animal began to struggle more, clearly desperate. The ropes cut even deeper with every movement. For the first time in years, Marcus felt uncomfortable. Not from the chill of the air conditioning or the humidity outside, but from something that seemed to be coming from inside his chest, a strange, almost forgotten sensation. He checked his phone again. Still an hour until the tow truck. The horse let out a louder whinny, almost a scream. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to ignore it, but the sound pierced through the car's windows, and something inside him shifted. It was as if that animal was calling not just for help, but specifically for him. "Damn it," he grumbled, turning off the AC. The rain had stopped, but the heavy clouds promised more to come. He got out of the car again, this time walking deliberately toward the tree, still not sure exactly why. The ground was soaked and muddy. With every step, Marcus felt his Italian shoes sinking into the wet earth, destroying leather that had cost more than the monthly salary of many of his employees. But strangely, it didn't irritate him as much as it should have. Getting closer, he could see the true extent of the animal's suffering. The horse was clearly a stallion, probably magnificent before this. The ropes weren't just ropes. They looked like they had been tied in a hurry, with rage. There were multiple loops around its neck, others on its hind legs, all too tight, all cutting. "Who the hell does something like this?" he murmured, surprised by the anger in his own voice. The horse watched him carefully but without fear, as if it instinctively knew he wasn't a threat. The large brown eyes seemed almost human in their ability to express both pain and hope at the same time. Marcus kept a safe distance. He'd heard stories of people being trampled by horses, and he had no intention of becoming a statistic because of an impulsive act of, charity. That word hadn't been in his vocabulary for decades. "Look, buddy," he said, feeling ridiculous for talking to an animal. "I don't know a thing about horses. I'm a businessman. Offices, contracts, acquisitions. That's my world." The animal tilted its head slightly, as if listening. "Besides," Marcus continued, "even if I wanted to help, which I don't, I have no way to cut these ropes. I'd need a knife or something." That's when he noticed a piece of rusty metal on the ground, near the fence that marked the abandoned property. It looked like part of an old farm tool. Marcus looked at the metal, then at the horse, then at his own ruined shoes. "This is crazy," he said to himself. "Completely insane. I have important meetings tomorrow. I have to review 3 contracts. And I'm here considering—" The horse let out another low moan, weaker this time. Its legs trembled slightly, obvious signs of exhaustion and dehydration. Marcus picked up the piece of metal. It was cold and rough in his hands, so different from the polished, refined objects he usually handled. He approached the animal cautiously. "Listen," he said, his voice lower now. "I don't know what I'm doing. If you kick me, I swear I'll sue, someone." The horse remained still, just watching as he approached the first rope, the one cutting into its neck. The proximity revealed even more disturbing details. The rope was so tight it had created a depression in the skin, and the wound was clearly infected. "Whoever did this to you wasn't just cruel," Marcus muttered, beginning to saw at the rope with the makeshift tool. "They were sadistic." The rope was thick and tough. His hands, accustomed only to shaking hands in meetings and signing documents, began to ache and blister almost immediately. His $3,000 suit was being stained with mud, dried blood, and sweat. Throughout the entire process, the horse didn't move. It was as if it understood that this strange man in expensive clothes was trying to help, despite all his inexperience and obvious reluctance. When the first rope snapped, the relief on the animal's neck was immediate. It let out a deep sigh, an almost human sound that made something strange happen in Marcus's chest. For the first time in decades, he felt something like satisfaction. Not the cold satisfaction of closing a profitable deal, but something different, warmer. "One down," he said, already moving to the second rope, this one tied around the hind legs. Neither of them knew that this simple moment, a bitter, wealthy man cutting ropes that bound an abandoned horse, was about to change both of their lives in ways that not even the most sophisticated contract could predict. The second rope was even tighter than the first. Marcus had to kneel in the mud to get a better angle, feeling his tailored trousers absorb the cold dampness of the ground. On any other day, this would have been unthinkable. He, who made a point of maintaining a flawless appearance at all times. "You're costing me a fortune in clothes," he complained to the horse, but his voice had lost its earlier irritation. There was something almost comforting in the complaint, as if it were just chatter between friends. The word surprised him. The animal lowered its head as he began to work on the leg rope, as if offering silent encouragement. Marcus noticed that the horse was deliberately shifting its weight to make the job easier, even if it caused more pain from the remaining ropes. "You're smart," he observed, impressed. "Smarter than half the directors I work with." As he sawed at the rope with increasingly determined movements, Marcus began to notice things he had ignored in the first few minutes. The horse, despite its terrible situation, had well-formed bones, muscles that suggested considerable strength when healthy, and a posture that, even in suffering, maintained a certain dignity. "You're not just any horse," he said, pausing for a moment to rest his bruised hands. "Someone cared for you, trained you. How the hell did you end up here?" For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine the story. Maybe the animal had belonged to a family that lost everything, forced to part with their most cherished possessions. Maybe it had been sold to someone who didn't understand its true value, who saw it only as a dead weight. The idea bothered him more than it should have. How many times had he himself acquired companies, fired people, destroyed dreams, without a thought for the stories behind the numbers on his spreadsheets? "No," he said aloud, shaking his head. "I'm not going to get philosophical over a horse." But even as he denied it, he continued working on the rope with renewed determination. His hands were bleeding now, blisters that had broken against the roughness of the makeshift tool. Every movement was painful, but he persisted. When the second rope finally snapped, the horse was able to move its hind legs for the first time in days. The relief was so obvious that Marcus felt a strange surge of pride, as if he had just closed the best deal of his career. 3 ropes remained, one around its torso, another binding its front legs, and a final one tied bizarrely between its head and one of its hind legs, forcing the animal into an uncomfortable position. "Whoever did this," Marcus muttered, moving to the 3rd rope, "wanted you to suffer. This wasn't simple abandonment. This was planned cruelty." The realization nauseated him. In all his years of destroying companies and careers, he had always convinced himself he was just doing business. He had never thought of his actions as deliberate cruelty, but looking at those ropes, at the calculated way they had been tied to cause maximum suffering, he saw something of himself that he didn't like. The horse, as if sensing his internal turmoil, made a low sound, not of pain this time, but something almost comforting. It was as if it were saying, "I understand." "You shouldn't be comforting me," Marcus said, surprised by his own observation. "I should be—" He stopped mid-sentence. When was the last time anyone had tried to comfort him? When was the last time he had allowed anyone close enough to try? His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was his assistant, Mr. Aldrich. "The tow truck is on its way. Another 40 minutes. "Right," he replied, looking at his dirty, injured hands. 40 minutes. Enough time to finish what he'd started. The 3rd rope was wrapped around the horse's torso in a way that was clearly restricting its breathing. Marcus could see the effort the animal made with each inhalation, its flanks moving laboriously. His zero experience with horses didn't stop him from understanding that this was potentially killing the animal slowly. "Easy there, buddy," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "This one's going to be tricky." He positioned himself beside the horse, feeling for the first time the warmth emanating from the large body. It was a strange sensation. He hadn't been this close to another living being, not even people, in decades. His social life consisted entirely of formal meetings, business dinners where every word was calculated, events where networking was the only goal. As he started sawing at the torso rope, the horse turned its head to watch him. Its large brown eyes met Marcus's, and for a bizarre moment he had the feeling that the animal was truly seeing him, not just looking, but seeing through all the layers of cynicism and coldness he had built up over the years. "Don't look at me like that," he muttered, uncomfortable. "This doesn't mean anything. I just don't want you dying on my watch." But even as he said it, he knew he was lying to himself. Something was happening here, something he couldn't name or control. With every scrape of the metal against the rope, with every small sigh of relief from the animal, he felt as if something inside himself was being set free too. The torso rope was the thickest of all. His hands, now seriously injured, trembled with the effort. Sweat mixed with the light drizzle that had started to fall again, making his normally impeccable hair stick to his forehead. "You know," he said, more to himself than to the horse, "I've spent 30 years building an empire, 30 years making everyone fear me, respect me, hate me, and no one has ever looked at me the way you're looking at me now." The horse blinked slowly, as if it understood. "You don't know who I am," Marcus continued, the metal slowly cutting through the tough fibers. "You don't know how many people I've fired, how many families I've destroyed, how many companies I've dismantled just because I could." His voice was getting lower, more reflective. It was as if the proximity to this animal was forcing out truths he had buried deep inside. "The last time someone looked at me hoping for something good," he paused, trying to remember. "I think it was my secretary 15 years ago. She was sick, needed a few days off to take care of her son. I fired her on the spot, said I didn't tolerate weakness." The rope began to give way. A few more saws and it would break completely. "I found out later her son had leukemia. She was desperate, working while sick just to keep her health insurance." Marcus stopped sawing for a moment, looking at his own battered hands. "I never found out what happened to them." The horse made a low sound, almost like a sympathetic sigh. "Why am I telling you this?" he asked, returning to the task. "You're a horse. You can't judge me. You can't sue me or try to blackmail me with this information." Finally, the rope snapped. The horse took a deep breath, filling its lungs completely for the first time in days. The sound of that relieved breath was so clear, so human in its expression of gratitude, that Marcus had to look away. 2 ropes were left, the one on the front legs, and that bizarre tether connecting its head to a hind leg, forcing the animal into a painfully unnatural position. He checked his phone. 25 minutes until the tow truck arrived. "We're going to make it," he said to the horse, and for the first time in decades he wasn't talking about profit or conquest. He was talking about something else entirely, something he didn't even know how to name, something that felt dangerously like hope. The 4th rope, binding the front legs, was partially buried in the mud. Marcus had to dig with his hands to expose it completely, feeling the cold earth pack under his manicured nails. His automatic reflex would have been disgust. He, who wore leather gloves to shake hands at meetings, was now literally hands deep in dirt. "My manicurist is going to have a fit," he commented, a reluctant smile playing on his lips. When was the last time he had smiled without calculating the effect it would have on whoever was watching? The horse lowered its head, almost touching Marcus's shoulder as he worked. It was a clear gesture of affection, and for the first time he didn't pull away from the physical contact. On the contrary, he felt comforted. "You know I'm not a good person, right?" he said, starting to saw at the muddy rope. "Just this morning, I took a company from a family. The woman cried in front of me, begged for an extension. I didn't even blink." As he worked, his mind went back to that morning. Mrs. Davis, in her 60s, trying to save the business she and her husband had built over 40 years. The tears streaming down her face as she explained how that company was all she had left of her husband's memory. "You know what I said to her?" he continued, the metal grinding through the wet rope. "I said that sentiment doesn't pay debts, that if she were a competent businesswoman, she wouldn't be in that situation." The horse turned its head slightly, as if listening to every word. "The truth is, I didn't even need that company. Marcus admitted, surprised by his own honesty. "I already own dozens just like it. I did it just because I could, because I like to win." But even as he said it, he realized the word win sounded hollow now. What exactly had he won by destroying that woman's dream? A few more million in an account that already held more money than he could spend in several lifetimes. The rope on the front legs finally gave way. The horse immediately adjusted its stance, distributing its weight more naturally. It was impressive how, even in suffering, the animal maintained a dignity that many humans lost in the face of far less. "You didn't give up," Marcus observed. "Now moving to the last rope, the most complicated one. Even tied up, even suffering, you never stopped believing someone would show up." He was talking about the horse, but the words echoed strangely inside him. When was the last time he himself had believed in anything? When had he stopped seeing the world as just a battlefield where you either destroy or are destroyed? The last rope was a complex tangle that connected the horse's head to one of its hind legs, forcing it into a position that likely caused constant pain in its spine and neck. Whoever had tied it had planned carefully to maximize the suffering. "This is going to hurt a little," he warned the horse, starting to work on the rope nearest its head. "You're going to have to trust me." Trust. Another word that had vanished from his vocabulary decades ago. He trusted no one, and more importantly, no one trusted him. That's how he liked it. Trust was vulnerability, and vulnerability was weakness. But there, kneeling in the mud, with his expensive clothes ruined and his hands bleeding, working to free an animal that should have been completely irrelevant to him, Marcus began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he had gotten it all wrong. The horse remained completely still as he worked on the final rope, placing its full faith in this dirty-suited stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. It was a kind of trust Marcus hadn't received, and hadn't deserved in longer than he could remember. The last rope was so tight it had carved deep grooves into both the horse's head and leg. Marcus had to work with extreme care, aware that one wrong move could injure the animal even more. His hands were shaking, not just from the physical effort, but from a sense of responsibility he had never felt before. "Easy," he whispered, more to himself than to the horse. "Slowly." As he cut through each fiber of the rope, he felt as if he were undoing something bigger than a simple knot. It was as if each scrape of the rusted metal was also cutting through years of cynicism, of calculated coldness, of indifference to the pain of others. "You know," he said, pausing to wipe sweat from his eyes, "you're probably the first living thing that doesn't want anything from me. You don't want my money. You don't want me to invest in your company. You don't want me to approve some project." The horse blinked slowly, its large eyes fixed on Marcus's face. "You just want to be free, and I can give that to you." The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. When was the last time someone had asked something of him that he could actually and wanted to give? Everyone who approached him wanted money, influence, connections. No one had ever simply asked for his humanity. "Almost there," he murmured, slicing through the last fibers of the rope. When it finally snapped, the effect was dramatic. The horse was able to lift its head completely for the first time, straightening its neck and taking a deep breath. For a few seconds, it stood perfectly still, as if it couldn't believe it was truly free. Then slowly, it turned to Marcus. What happened next was something he would carry with him for the rest of his life. The horse lowered its great head and gently touched its forehead to Marcus's face, a gesture of gratitude so pure, so simple, so completely devoid of any ulterior motive, that he felt something definitively break inside his chest. Tears welled in his eyes. Real tears, not the calculated ones he sometimes forced during negotiations to manipulate emotional opponents. These were tears that came from a place he had locked away so long ago he'd forgotten it existed. "You're welcome," he managed to say, his voice hoarse. The horse stepped back a few paces, testing its legs. It was clearly weak and injured, but it was free. Free to move, to breathe, to exist without constant pain. Marcus remained kneeling in the mud, watching. His clothes were destroyed, his hands were bleeding, his hair was disheveled and dirty. He probably looked the worst he had in his entire adult life. And he felt good, better than he had felt in decades. The horse walked a few yards, then stopped and looked back, as if making sure Marcus was okay. It was a level of care no one had shown him in years. "Go on," Marcus said, gesturing with his hand. "You're free. You can go wherever you want." But the horse didn't leave. Instead, it walked back and stood beside Marcus, lowering its head to graze on the sparse grass growing nearby. It was as if to say, "I'm in no hurry. We can stay here a little longer." For the first time in his adult life, Marcus was in no hurry either. He sat down on the wet grass, leaning against the tree where the horse had been tied, and just existed. Not planning his next move, not calculating advantages, not thinking about how to monetize the situation. Just a man and a horse, two creatures who had found something unexpected on a rainy afternoon in the middle of nowhere. His phone rang. The tow truck was arriving. Marcus looked at the device, then at the horse grazing peacefully beside him, then at his own battered hands that had done something good for the first time in decades. 5 more minutes won't make a difference, he said aloud, declining the call. For the first time in his life, there was something more important than efficiency and punctuality. There was a moment that deserved to be fully lived. The sound of the approaching tow truck echoed down the empty road. Marcus knew he should get up, go back to his normal life, but he couldn't move. He'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, just watching the horse graze and move slowly, testing its injured but finally free legs. Mr. Aldrich, the tow truck driver, a middle-aged man in dirty work clothes, stopped short at the bizarre scene. A clearly wealthy man, his expensive suit completely ruined, sitting on the grass next to an injured horse. "Yes," Marcus replied, still not getting up. "The car is that Bentley." The driver looked from the car to Marcus, then to the horse, trying to piece the situation together. "Are you okay, sir? Do you need any medical help?" Marcus laughed, a genuine sound that surprised him. "No, I'm not hurt, just had to take care of a situation." "That horse there," the driver said, approaching cautiously, "looks like it was tied up for a while. It's got rope marks all over it." "It was," Marcus confirmed. "Someone abandoned it here. Tied it up to suffer." There was anger in his voice, but not the cold, calculated anger he usually felt when someone tried to cheat him in a deal. It was a hot, human anger, the kind that flares up when you see an injustice done to the defenseless. The driver shook his head. "Cruel people everywhere. Good on you for stopping to help. Not everyone would do that." The words hit Marcus unexpectedly. Not everyone would do that. It was true, and he himself, just a few hours ago, definitely would not have. He would have called someone, maybe the authorities, maybe not, and gone on his way without a second glance. "Should we get your car hooked up?" the driver asked. Marcus finally stood, his joints protesting after sitting in one position for so long. He looked at the horse, which had stopped grazing and was watching them intently. "What will happen to him?" Marcus asked, surprising himself. "The horse? Well, if no one claims him, usually these abandoned animals get picked up by the county. Depending on their condition, they might go to a sanctuary or—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood. The horse's fate would be uncertain at best, tragic at worst. "Is there a vet around here?" Marcus asked abruptly. "There's Dr. Miller, about 10 miles from here, specializes in large animals. Why?" Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket, ignoring the mud smears on the screen. "I need his number." The tow truck driver looked at him with renewed curiosity. "You're going to take care of the horse?" It was a simple question, but it reverberated inside Marcus like an echo. Was he going to take care of the horse? He, who had never taken care of anything besides his own interests, who considered even office plants an unnecessary responsibility. He looked at the animal, which continued to watch them with those intelligent, trusting eyes. The horse had spent days tied up, suffering, yet it had shown no aggression when Marcus approached. On the contrary, it had completely trusted the stranger who showed up to help. "Yes," Marcus said, the word coming out before he could analyze all its implications. "I'm going to take care of him," the driver smiled. "That's a good deed. An animal like this deserves a second chance." A second chance. Marcus repeated the phrase in his mind as he dialed the veterinarian's number. When was the last time he had given anyone a second chance? When had he believed that people, or animals, could change, improve, become something different from what they appeared to be on the surface? "Dr. Miller, I have a horse here that needs urgent medical care. Yes, I can pay. No, the cost doesn't matter." It was the first time in decades he had said, "The cost doesn't matter," in reference to something that wouldn't generate a direct profit for him. And for the first time in decades, he felt he was doing exactly the right thing. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood at the edge of a pasture he never imagined he would buy. 50 acres of green, rolling hills, an hour from Chicago, with refurbished stables and a small house that served as an office for the full-time vet he had hired to care for the horse. "How is he today?" he asked Dr. Miller, who was approaching with a chart in his hands. "Much better. The wounds have healed nicely. He's gained weight, and yesterday we got him to gallop for the first time. He's an exceptional animal, Mr. Aldrich. With this care, he'll live a long, healthy life." Marcus watched the horse, whom he had decided to name Hope, though he would never admit the sentimental name to anyone, grazing peacefully in the shade of a tree. It was hard to believe it was the same injured, bound animal he had found on that road. "Doctor," Marcus said hesitantly, "I have a strange question. Is it possible for animals to feel gratitude?" "Real gratitude?" Dr. Miller smiled. "Are you asking because of the way he acts when you show up?" That was exactly it. Every time Marcus visited, which had become a daily ritual to his own surprise, the horse would come straight to him, lowering its head for a caress and staying nearby as long as he was there. "Horses are very intelligent social animals," the vet explained. "They remember who treated them kindly, and they form real bonds. What you two have, it's special." Marcus nodded, feeling a little foolish for asking, but also relieved to know he wasn't imagining things. His phone rang. It was Helen, his assistant. "Mr. Aldrich, Mrs. Davis is here. She brought a cake, says it's to thank you for what you did." Marcus was confused. "Thank me for what? I bought out her company." "No, sir, for what you did afterward. She said you called last week and offered her daughter a job at our company with a better salary than she was making at the family business, and that you also paid for her grandson's medical treatment." "Oh, that." After that afternoon with the horse, Marcus had spent a restless week, rethinking not just that acquisition, but dozens of others. He couldn't stop thinking about the widow, Mrs. Davis, her tears, the genuine desperation he had completely ignored. So he had made a few calls. He found out her daughter was working 3 jobs to support the family after they lost the company, that her grandson had a health problem requiring expensive surgery, small human details he had never bothered to investigate before. "Tell her that. It was the least I could do," he said into the phone. "Sir, she's crying in the lobby. She says you saved her family." Marcus ended the call, feeling something strange in his chest. It wasn't the cold satisfaction of closing a good deal. It was something warmer, more complete. "Good news?" Dr. Miller asked. "Let's just say I'm correcting some past mistakes. In fact, over the last 3 weeks, Marcus had made more corrections than in his entire previous career. He had rehired the secretary he'd fired years ago with a substantially better salary and comprehensive health insurance for her whole family. He had started a fund to help the families of former employees who were struggling. He had even begun to overhaul his acquisition methods, looking for ways to grow businesses without destroying lives. Hope ambled over to the fence, looking directly at Marcus as he always did. He reached out, stroking the animal's soft muzzle. "You know," he said to the horse, "I used to think compassion was a weakness, that helping others was a waste of time and money." The horse tilted its head, as if listening intently. "But maybe I was wrong about everything." It was the first time in his life that Marcus Aldrich had admitted to being wrong about something fundamental. And surprisingly, instead of feeling diminished, he finally felt whole. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the stage of a charity gala he had organized himself. The ballroom was packed with CEOs, politicians, and animal rights activists, a combination he never would have imagined bringing under one roof. "A year ago," he began his speech looking out at the crowd, "I was the kind of person you would probably despise. I measured success only in numbers. I treated employees like statistics. I destroyed family businesses without a second thought." A few murmurs rippled through the audience. Marcus had insisted on starting with total honesty, against the advice of all his PR consultants. Then, one rainy afternoon, my car broke down on a forgotten road, and I found a horse tied to a tree, left to die a slow death. In the front row, Dr. Miller smiled encouragingly. Beside him, Helen, his assistant, who now also coordinated the company's social projects, was taking notes. I could have ignored him. I should have ignored him based on the man I was. But something about that animal, something in the way he looked at me, hoping for help, even after being treated so cruelly by humans, it changed something fundamental inside of me. Marcus paused, finding a familiar face in the crowd, Mrs. Davis, who had become a sort of informal advisor for his new social initiatives. I set that horse free, and in the process he set something free in me, something I had buried so deep I didn't even remember it existed, the capacity for genuine empathy. After the event, Marcus drove straight to the sanctuary. That's what he called the property now, no longer just the horse farm, but a true sanctuary for rescued animals. Hope was no longer alone. There were now 12 horses, a few donkeys, several goats, and even a pack of dogs that had been saved from neglect. "How was the event?" asked Dr. Miller, who was checking on one of the newer horses. "We raised $2 million, Marcus replied. "Enough to expand the sanctuary and create 3 new rescue centers." But the money, incredibly, was no longer his primary concern. It was the first time in his life he had organized something where profit wasn't the end goal. Hope, as always, came to meet him as soon as he saw him. The horse was completely transformed. His black coat now shone with health, his muscles were well defined, and there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there that first afternoon. "You saved more than just me, you know," Marcus said, stroking the animal's neck. "The company is doing better than ever. I discovered that happy employees work better than fearful ones." It was true. After he started treating people like actual human beings instead of disposable resources, productivity had soared, turnover had plummeted, and new talent was eager to work for him. "And there's more," he continued, his voice low, as if sharing a secret. "I met someone." Dr. Miller looked up, interested. In all these months, Marcus had never mentioned a personal life. "A volunteer veterinarian who works at our rescue centers. Anna, she's not impressed by my money at all. In fact, I think she hated me at first." Marcus smiled at the memory. Anna had been blunt. "Are you one of those rich guys who thinks he can buy a clear conscience by throwing money around?" But she's seen that the changes are real, that it's not just marketing or guilt, it's Genuine transformation. Hope made a low sound, almost like an approval. "You approve?" Marcus asked, laughing. "Good, because I'm going to ask her to marry me next month." The decision to get married had surprised even him. He had always seen marriage as a complicated business contract, but with Anna, for the first time, he could imagine sharing not just assets, but dreams, hopes, and the work of making the world a little better. "It'll be a simple ceremony," he told Hope, "right here at the sanctuary, and you'll be there, of course. After all, you're the one who taught me there are more important things than money." For the first time in his life, Marcus Aldrich was truly rich. 2 years later, on a sunny spring morning, Marcus sat on the porch of the house he'd built at the sanctuary, watching Anna play with a group of children visiting the rescued animals as part of an educational program they had created together. "Daddy Marcus," decried 7-year-old Lily, running toward him. "Hope let me brush him." Lily was the daughter of a former employee he had fired years ago, who now worked as a coordinator at one of the rescue centers. When she had started calling him Daddy Marcus, he had been moved in a way he couldn't explain. "He likes you," Marcus said, hugging the little girl. "Hope is a good judge of character." Anna walked over, smiling. She was 6 months pregnant, a pregnancy that had been celebrated by the entire community that had formed around the sanctuaries. "Dr. Miller said 2 more horses arrived today," she informed him, sitting down beside Marcus. "Rescued from a terrible situation, but they're going to be okay." Marcus nodded. In the last 2 years, they had expanded to 8 sanctuaries across the country, rescuing hundreds of animals and offering animal-assisted therapy programs for children and adults in recovery. "I have some news," Anna said, pulling an envelope from her bag. It arrived today. Marcus opened it and found an official letter recognizing their sanctuaries as an international model for animal rescue and rehabilitation. He was being invited to speak at the United Nations on compassion and social transformation. "Are you going to accept?" Anna asked. Marcus looked around, at the children playing with the animals, at the employees who were now like family, at the horses grazing peacefully in pastures he had turned from an investment into a home. "I don't know if I have the authority to speak on transformation," he said honestly. "I'm still learning." "That's exactly why you should speak," Anna replied, "because your transformation was real. It wasn't a self-help book or a weekend course. It was an abandoned horse on a road that you could have ignored." Hope, as if he knew they were talking about him, approached the fence nearest the porch. Now nearly 10 years old, the horse had become not only the symbol of the sanctuaries, but a sort of therapist for other rescued animals. He seemed to instinctively understand when an animal arrived traumatized, and would offer the calm companionship they needed to heal. "You know what impresses me most?" Anna said, watching Hope. "He holds no grudges. After everything he went through, he still trusts people. He still believes we can be good." Marcus stood and walked to the fence, reaching out to stroke the familiar muzzle. Hope leaned into the touch, as he always did. "Maybe that's what I should talk about at the UN," Marcus said thoughtfully. "About second chances, about how animals teach us to forgive, about how sometimes we need to be saved before we can save others, and about how compassion isn't weakness," Anna added. "It's the greatest strength there is." Marcus smiled, remembering how he used to see compassion as a vulnerability. He now understood it was the exact opposite. His former coldness had been the weakness. Weakness disguised as strength, fear disguised as power. "I'll accept the invitation," he said to Anna. "But on one condition, Hope comes with me. If I'm going to talk about transformation, he needs to be there. After all, he's the one who started it all." That night, after the children had left and the staff had turned in, Marcus took his nightly walk through the sanctuary, a ritual he had developed over the years. He checked that all the animals were safe, comfortable, loved. He stopped in front of Hope's stable, where a simple plaque read, "In memory of all the animals who weren't so lucky, and in honor of those who can still be saved." "Thank you," he said simply to the horse resting in the clean straw, "for teaching me that it's never too late to be a better person." Hope opened his eyes and looked at him with the same trust and affection as always. And Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he had finally found what he had been searching for his entire life. Not more money or power, but purpose. The purpose of using his second chance to give second chances to others. The transformation was complete, but the journey of compassion was just beginning, and if you believe that everyone deserves a second chance, that compassion can transform lives, share this story. Because in today's world, we need to remember that we are capable of change, of love, and of making this world a better place for all the beings who share it with us.